Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Parent Heroes Podcast. I'm your host, Zach, and this show aims to bring inspiration to parents out there. We're always talking with inspiring parents, inspiring educators, in hopes that you pick up something from their story and inspires you to go out and do great things. So I'm really excited about our guest today, Audra, and she was put onto my radar from our past guest, Sam. And I said, Sam, give me an amazing parent that everybody should hear their story. He said, I got the one for you. And as Audra and I got to know each other and chat a little bit more, man, what she has been through with the education system, the legal system, the going at it on her own system, man, it is inspiring, and it's a tough situation. And so I hope that everyone today, whether you could relate to the exact path she's been on or not, you get some of that parent hero inspiration from her, and I know that you will. So without any further ado, Audra, come on down.
Hi. Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it is my pleasure. I'm really glad that we have gotten a chance to chat a little bit, and I'm really excited for this. So let's just jump in so that people have some context. Can you share a little story about what you've been through with your son? Because it's a lot. I'm just going to step back and let you paint a picture for everyone.
Sure. I'm happy to give you a little bit of a history about my journey with my son. So I did write down a little bit of notes because it's a long one and it's a messy one, but I do want to be able to refer back. So basically what I would say is that when Luca was ready to go to preschool, we found the sweetest, most lovely, most adorable neighborhood preschool in our neighborhood in New York City. And we began when he was, I want to say 2.5, almost 3, kind of that regular half day thing. And very quickly it was apparent that Luca did not want to separate. So I spent the first 3 months of preschool going to preschool with Luca. I went every day. I sat in the classroom every day. And I was sort of his touchstone. So I literally became part of the deal. And eventually, after 3 months of him being there, he looked at me and said, "You don't have to come anymore. I'm okay." And I said, "Okay, great." But that, I would say, that was sort of the first indication of, every other mom, this was like maybe a week process, a 2-week process where there's that whole separation thing that happens naturally. Every other mom was able to leave, and for whatever reason, for Luca, it was, no, I'm not going to be okay if you leave. And, I had tried, but I had gotten a phone call from the school and they were like, this isn't working. You have to go back. Yeah. So that's what I did. I sat there for 3 months. Fortunately, he separated. I would say 2 or 3 months after that, I got another phone call from the school saying, we really think that you need to have New York City come in and do an assessment. So in New York, when kids are identified as having challenges, schools are able to call the city directly and say, we believe there's challenges here. This is a child that needs some sort of a support. Will you come in and do an assessment? So they did. They came in and they looked at Luca and they said to me, and they gave me a huge report. And they said to me, we believe he needs occupational therapy, physical therapy, and an IEP. So, and with a one-to-one. Right? So that would be a one-to-one person that could be in the classroom with him when he was there, along with occupational therapy and physical therapy. And this was kind of surprising to me. And I was a first-time parent, and this was my only child. And so I was concerned and confused and thought, he's just kind of a quirky guy. And I wasn't sure where that was going to lead. I wasn't sure what that meant for him.
Yeah.
Because he was an incredibly sweet, outgoing, really bright child. So I didn't see any difference between him and anybody else. I just saw my kid, right? So, but there was started to be little things in my brain like, wait a minute, what's going on here? This is weird. So when we got to the end of preschool, and I would say that preschool was okay. The moments where I recognized we were going to have more challenges than other parents would be like, let's say his one-to-one called in sick. The school would say to me, oh, it's okay. You can drop him off. We'll be fine. But then I'd get a call 2 hours in and they'd say, we're not able to do this. You need to come and pick him up. So that was a little disappointing and a little disconcerting because again, you felt like, well, why is my child so different? How is my child so different? And
Yeah.
it wasn't something I was seeing at home. And
Mm.
that's a really important distinction, I feel like. When you are, everything seems fine at home, you're not understanding, well, why is it that he's fine at home, but he can't be okay at school? You normally
Mm.
hear the opposite. You normally hear parents say, oh God, my kid's so challenging. They're so difficult, right? But the teachers are like, we've got it. You're fine. That
Yeah.
was so not my experience. I'm having the opposite experience. I was like, my kid's so easy. What's the problem? Couldn't figure it out. So we come to going to look at kindergartens. And this was really interesting because I was told at the time by the administration of the preschool, they were like, you know what, we really don't think you should do public school for him. It's really not. It's going to be too much. And I was like, well, why? I don't understand. And they're like, you know what? Go and tour. Go and see what it looks like. So I had his one-to-one with me when we went and toured all these kindergartens. And what she started to point out to me, and I started to realize was, oh, there is visually, it's like an explosion visually, right? There are pictures on every wall. There are paintings, there are drawings, there's art, there's constant stimulation. And also they were saying to me, like when music was playing in the classroom in preschool, they're like, Luca can't hear us at all. So they would
Mm.
have like light, like tinkly kids music playing,
Yeah.
but he could not attend on any level. So any distraction, it was also one of those schools where like there were three separate spaces for each group of kids.
Yeah.
He was constantly moving in and out of them because he was hearing things that were distracting
Yeah.
him. Right, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, when I went and toured these kindergarten classrooms, I started to realize, oh, he is visually seeing so much that he could never sit and attend. He's hearing so much from all around him, from other kids, from other stimulation that's happening. He just cannot attend in these settings. So at that point, it was when I went into a meeting, an IEP meeting, and I said to the school board, the New York City School Board, I said, there's no way that my child could be in a public school. There's no way that he could be in a classroom with 25 children. He's not even able to be in a classroom with 10. So a classroom with 25 is definitely not going to work. And when I'm looking at these classrooms, I'm seeing that there's so much visual and auditory stimulation. There's just no way that he's going to be able to attend to what you're doing. The other piece that I didn't even get to is this was also a child who at 3.5 was reading at an extremely high level. So we were already showing this twice exceptionality, which is this idea of being gifted and having learning differences. That whole part was another piece of my argument to New York City. It was, well, wait a second. Not only are we talking about a kid who has learning differences and who's seriously sensory overloaded by your space, he's also very gifted. So how are we attending to that piece? And they really didn't have any answers for me. So the answer for New York City is, okay, you can go out and you can look at these potential private schools that exist that could attend to his needs. You then have to sue the school board, and you have to have an attorney, and you have to have a neuropsych, and you have to have, paperwork backing up everything that you're saying, which is a deep dive into all the ugly nitty gritty of your kid and not very fun, I would say. Not where you really want to be as a parent. You don't want to sit around and think about all the ugly pieces or the difficult pieces or the challenging pieces and kind of amplify that in order to get the services your child actually needs or the setting your child actually needs to be in. But that's what's required when you go down this road with an IEP. So while it's meant to be this great thing to help support parents and get what they need for their kids, on the other hand, because it is a legal battle, it is a true fight that you have to have. And so I did that. I had the fight. I brought it to them and I said, there's no way he could be here. And I found what I thought was going to be the other end of the spectrum, which
Yeah.
was this twice exceptional school in New York City. It was the total opposite in terms of environment. It was
Mm.
very sterile. It was very therapeutic. And this was what everyone told me. this is going to be the answer. You need to take him from that very classic neurotypical environment and put him in this environment where he's going to be completely supported by all these doctors and therapists and people who can help him. So I thought it was going to be I thought that, okay, well, that's the answer, right?
Yeah.
So I fought the city. I sold my apartment to get the money to do this. I moved myself downtown into downtown so that I could be very close to the school so I could walk him there. And I put him in this therapeutic school. And I can remember in the very beginning dropping him off, and it's kindergarten and you're so nervous and they're so little, right? And there was something in the back of my head that was like, something's different. And it was that it was so quiet. It was pin drop quiet. And something about that didn't feel right to me.
Yeah.
It was like I wanted it to be right because everyone was telling me this was right, but there's a lack of joy that exists inside that therapeutic world that now I can define very clearly, but in the moment I just knew made me feel uneasy.
Yeah.
So we attempted to do this very therapeutic environment. What it really ended up being was a lot of people trying to work on his differences rather than celebrating his gifts.
Yeah.
And it just turned into a battle between him and the teachers and not really seeing what he had to bring. It was more about, they, like anywhere else, when you are forced to live inside of Common Core, and when you've got schools that, while they are private schools, they're still being supported by New York City because they're part of this, this program. They have to hit all those marks. So you're fighting with him to write in kindergarten, which he did not want to do. And then it turned into, well, then if you're not going to do this, or if you're not going to attend in the way we want you to, then we're going to have you stay in instead of going to recess. In kindergarten. So there was a lot of ABA being used. There was a lot of, again, therapeutic stuff that for a kid that was 5, 6, 7 years old, they had no business doing, but they had to hit their marks too. And I think what they really wanted was for them to look as neurotypical as possible. Because what happens is, as a parent, I sat in on these meetings and listened to parents cry and be so upset and say to the staff, like, what's going to happen to my kid?
Oh.
There's all this very deep worry. I don't know why I always felt like, and again, maybe it's because I come from an arts background, but I always felt like, you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Even if you are, quirky, different, unusual, funky, I am going to be here because I'm your person.
Yeah.
And you're going to be okay. There is a whole sect of society that is that.
Yeah.
And I think when you start to really look at people and see who's out there in the world, you go, wait a minute, you don't have to be this neurotypical dude that's going to sit at a desk all day or whatever it is that we think people have to be. And so I really wasn't that afraid of what it meant. I was afraid of what it meant as far as how am I going to teach this child?
Yeah.
But I wasn't that afraid as far as your whole future was concerned. There might be a little piece of the back of yourself that's always thinking will you be able to take care of yourself as far as executive function, right? Mm-hmm. Will you be able to hit all those marks? Will you remember to do those things that are just about taking care of yourself? But as far as your brain and your ability to communicate and who you are, you're going to be great. Yeah. That part didn't scare me too much. Yeah. So suffice it to say, we went through 2 years of that very therapeutic school. And by the time we got to the end of the second, he was like, I don't want to go there anymore, Mom. Mm-hmm. I don't like it. It makes me feel bad. I'm sad. Please don't make me go there anymore. And for my 7-year-old to look at me and say that, I was like, this is all wrong. This is a 7-year-old child that already hates school, which was just the worst thing I could possibly imagine. Because
I also told my parents in 3rd grade I was done with the education system and I didn't understand why they wouldn't let me stop going to school. That was a very different situation than what you're talking about, though.
But I get it, right? I totally get it. I think that, we're both talking about maybe it could have been a much better better setting for us in different ways, for my son in different ways. And unfortunately, right, he really, I just felt like he was really way too young and sweet. And like I said, again, I'm getting all this feedback from them. He's so challenging. We're having all these issues. And I was like, this isn't happening at home. I don't understand. This is a child that's really happy and really content and really all good. It's only when you're putting him in school that we're having all these issues. Well, then maybe school is the problem, not my child. And that was like the big ding ding, right? I went, this is not about him. This is about the environment.
Yeah.
So we pulled him out. We pulled him out and we said, that's it. That was at the end of first grade. We were like, let's give it a whirl. Let's try. And homeschool, which was so not my parent plan. I really have to tell you right now,
Yeah.
this was not what I had in mind. I was not thinking that I was going to be a homeschool parent. That was not how I wanted to go. But luckily for us, like 6 months after we had said we were going to do this, so we left again. We left our apartment in New York. We decided we're going to go buy a house. We went out and bought a house, and COVID hit. So we were really fortunate to have left New York when we did. And that was just, luck, sheer luck. But the beauty of that was that all of a sudden, all these incredible schools showed up online. There was a dearth of online schooling.
Yeah.
So this notion that I was going to be, downstairs in the basement with my blackboard teaching turned into, wow, look at all these incredible resources I have online. There's all these amazing schools. So I started, over the course of the next couple of years, I started obviously Googling and researching and Facebooking. And, there's all these parents talking about twice exceptional kids or homeschooling kids or alternative ways to teach your kid. And I sort of began curating this amazing group of schools and individuals who could teach my kid online.
Wow.
So hence how I found Sam.
So yeah, tell us how that led into you finding
Sam. So first it started out with, I worked with a school called Sunnyside out of San Francisco. This was a twice exceptional school run by Jade Rivera, who is a fabulous, incredible 2E human. But I didn't know anything about her. This was like Google. I actually found her on on a Facebook page, right? Somebody saying, wow, our kid is, part of Sunnyside. This place is brilliant. So I got on the phone with her and she spoke my language. It was like, we were right. It was right there. It was all those things that she was saying. And I had told her the big, long story that I just told you. And she was like, yes. And this is how we could go about doing this in a different way. And I was so excited because I was like, oh, this person really understands.
What was the thing that she said in that call that really, one, made you feel like she gets it, but two, that what was it she did? Like, what was their plan? How do they solve this? I'm really curious.
It's a great question. It really does come down to understanding two things: that everybody is an individual in that world, in the world of twice exceptionality, or even in the world with just kids with learning differences. They're very individual. And so you cannot use a one size fits all. What you can do is present information and then allow the child to present it back in the way that resonates for them.
Interesting.
And that was really the key, was that she was doing, I'm going to call it project-based, because that's really, if you want to put it in a box, I'd call it project-based learning. Insofar as the information was presented, and then he got to sort of reflect it back in whatever way he wanted to. He wanted to make Lego movies, and so we made Lego movies.
Best idea ever.
Right? And those Lego movies, I mean, he had mom and dad who were actors, so we got to voice all these incredible characters.
Oh, no kidding. Oh,
which was so cool. And he made all these Lego movies about the circulatory system and about geography and about all these different subjects that they were learning. but he made movies to tell the stories or to give the information back about those. And each kid had an individual way of reflecting back that information.
Wow.
And that was the most brilliant piece for me, because I realized that, oh, if you present this information and then just let them tell the story, A, they're going to get it better, right? They're going to retain it better. And B, it's their own stuff. They're excited about it. It's the
Yeah.
story they want to tell, not the story. And this is such a thing about teachers. And I really wanted to reflect on this as far as like curating teachers. The
Mm.
absolute best teachers are the teachers who don't really want to hear themselves talk. They're the teachers that present, and there's a lot of that, right? Like classic typical teacher is teacher that just wants to hear their own voice,
Yeah.
and they're not really listening. The teachers that are the best are the ones that are asking the questions and then really listening. And it's really interesting too, because I do scaffold a lot in the classroom still for Luca in all of these classes. And there will be these tremendous long pauses where a teacher will say something or ask something. And there'll be a long pause where either my son or another student in these class is thinking. And that teacher will just let it sit. And they will wait for what we would view as like, oh my God, this is so long. I'm so uncomfortable. It's so quiet. But they know that you just have to give that child the time to process, to get to wherever it is that they need to get. And eventually they will bring you what is inside of them.
God, that is such a gift. And for those educators out there, because we do have educators listening, this was part of my training and upbringing was pause, wait longer, and to
Yeah.
be able to masterfully sit in silence is such a skill. I love that. So this school, it really spoke the language. It laid out a great plan. And for those, I'm realizing not everybody is going to have known who Sam is. So Sam Young was a previous guest. He runs an amazing program called the Young Academy, right? Is Young
Young scholars.
Scholar Academy for twice exceptional students. So some of this language that we're throwing around, I just want to take a moment to repeat. So twice exceptional is when you have moderate to severe learning differences, but you also have moderate to extreme exceptionalities in certain areas. I wish I knew about this term growing up myself, and Sam and I get into this in the whole episode. So after this, you can go back and listen to that one. How did you go from Sunnyside into Sam? And then I want to open the conversation to some other directions too.
Yeah. Sunnyside, because Jade was part of Bridges Academy
Yeah.
in Southern California, um, which is a in-person 2E. I think they also have some online for high school, but they're an
Kind
in-person
of a
2E.
birthplace of the 2E movement for
Definitely.
school. Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely. So, I think, when she decided to move on from having her online school, because she was a brick and mortar previous to that in San Francisco during COVID. I think she decided to go a different direction, and she had sort of introduced me to Sam and
Yeah.
said, this is who I think you should really start working with and looking at. And what's really cool about what Sam does is this.
Yeah. Tell us.
Yeah, what I love about what Sam is doing is that they are offering all these different choices of classes that are very much, they're completely interest based. And they're the most eclectic, interesting out there, and the teachers are awesome. They're exactly what I'm talking about. They know the language to speak. They're also teaching at such a high level. It's an extraordinary thing. And this is also something that I've talked about many times with other parents in my circle. I often feel like kids are underestimated. I feel like,
Ooh.
yeah, I feel like if you put them in front of extraordinary challenges and incredible teachers and give them really heightened information, they will rise to the
Yeah.
challenge. It's
Yes.
like, because they're being put in a situation where we have to accommodate everybody, the information is never really as heightened as it could be. And while, yes, my son is, he's a gifted kid, he's a really smart kid, it it isn't it's not a profundity, right? It's not
Yeah.
that. We're not talking about that level, right? We're not talking about a kid that, that's a different trajectory. A
Yeah.
parent of a child that is profoundly gifted, that's a completely different reality. We're
Yeah.
talking about a gifted kid. There's
Yeah.
a lot of gifted kids out there.
Yeah.
That's not that unusual to me. But I do ask myself the question, maybe there's way more than we realize, and we're just not putting the information out there. They're not being given the opportunity to show you how gifted they are because you're not even showing them what they could potentially be
Not
learning,
even close to it. Yeah.
you know? So that's what's going on at Young Scholars. At Young Scholars, it's like always pushing, 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 pushing. And sometimes Mr. Sam will give them these debate topics that I'm like, is he crazy? What is this question? This question is way, these are like debate topics that I go, well, this is too hard. My son doesn't know anything about this subject. But because my son loves the challenge and is so motivated by, again, the relationship to Mr. Sam, which that's a whole other piece about teachers,
It is. It is.
all about that relationship.
Yeah.
If you give him positive feedback, he's going to give you 20-fold. If you give him negative feedback, he's like, bye,
Shut down. Yeah.
zero. So this is, and that's a whole other thing. Like you have to know that. Like you have to know that if you give him something good, he's just going to give it back, like I said.
You do. I had a teacher when I was young. I didn't know this story till later in life. My mom told me at one point she kind of insulted me or like put me down. I didn't talk to her for the rest of the school year. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I have no recollection of this, but the teacher was like, he never spoke to me again. He wouldn't address me, wouldn't respond. And I was just so sensitive. But the relationship's so important. What Sam is doing is just off the charts. And I'm so glad that like we've talked about Sam, but now we get your take and your perspective. And yeah, the classes are just wild and the way they challenge, and it's hard. I feel for teachers in the system. I've taught in a bunch of different systems, and I've seen how much work it takes to prepare that, what you're up against, what you have to do to challenge something. Even as parents, right? What do we have to do to challenge our kids? It's next level. We can't be sitting around just taking it easy. And I think that one of the reasons I think you're a great guest to have and people are going to get inspiration from you is like, I mean, you didn't always have a choice, but you did. And you were constantly just looking, what can I do? What can I do? And I bet that there were times where you're like, man, maybe I wish I didn't have to do this, or like other people have it different, but it's our
Yeah.
kids, right? So we do as much as we can. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
let's open it up a little bit. And I mean, because I could ask you all day about your approach and how he's doing, but talk to us a little bit briefly about what was your education growing up? You mentioned the arts. I want to hear a little bit more about how that developed, and particularly two things like what is it from your upbringing that you either figured out on your own that you have wanted to move forward and has played a positive role? And what was it that you saw that maybe now you're realizing, man, that was a bad example and I don't want to perpetuate that? Do you have a
Right.
little bit you could share with us on that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that I had a very traditional upbringing, although interestingly, at a very young age, I was in a very progressive school, progressive private school when I was, I want to say, second grade. And they also called my mom in and said, we're having a really hard time. Um, they try, and that's not surprising now knowing my child, right? They tried to, they did have me assessed. And again, girl, not going to identify as ADHD. I don't know if that's true for me at this phase as an adult. Regardless, I've muddled through my life, but the educational system definitely failed me. And I
Hmm.
think that that's because I wasn't that interested. I found school very, very boring.
Yeah.
I think that what the only thing that kept me in was the arts. I was very into theater. That was identified when I was probably about 10. And so I was in like a half day regular school, half day theater school.
Oh,
So I was a
cool.
theater kid.
Yeah.
I was a theater kid and I loved that. I absolutely loved that. And that was what kept me there because otherwise I just would not have been there. And I did graduate with a 1.4 GPA and really like barely squeaked
Love
by
that.
life.
Solid.
Yeah. got through, like barely squeaked by. And it just wasn't for me. And then I went on to a fine arts college because that was the right trajectory for me. So that,
Yeah.
that's a really interesting story too, insofar as both my husband and I, neither one of us have college degrees, but we both succeeded in life because we chose careers that were right for our gifts, right? Our gifts were as, performers. So that's how we succeeded. And I think that that's also a testament to why I never got so freaked about my son, was
Yeah.
that I recognized that if this wasn't your trajectory, if you're not a school guy, or if we're going to do something alternative, or if it's going to look different, that's going to be okay, because there's always going to be this world for you in the fine arts that I really believed socially and as a school would work for him.
I love that. I love this so much. And I have so many questions for you. So let me just throw out a couple
Yeah.
and we'll kind of delve into a little bit. One is when you were going through this process, you and I have chatted a little bit, so I know that there were key times where other people and community of parents were instrumental. How did you go about making friends, finding people, connecting with other parents and kids through this process? Because I imagine that that's been a huge part of feeling supported, getting answers. Talk to us a little bit about what that looked like for you.
Yeah, I would say that do you mean more now in terms of like where
Oh,
we are?
like whatever jumps out to you. Maybe it was earlier on, maybe it's
Yeah,
now. Yeah.
I would say that actually all along the way, you're very right in pointing all that out. All along the way, there were parents, even in the preschool setting.
Yeah.
Once people knew, other parents knew, oh, your kid has a one-to-one, and they're like, oh, so does my kid.
Yeah.
Here's what you need to do. So, it was a very supportive community very early on. And then, there's a lull when we first started going down our own path where you felt very alone. But that was also COVID. So I would say that that was a product of that as well. Once we got into Mr. I call him Mr. Sam
Yeah.
because that's what Luca calls him. Once we got into the 2E community, that's
Mhm.
when we sort of started to connect with other parents that were like-minded. And now my phone, I have like all these fabulous moms that I could be like, oh, what are you going to do about this? Or what do you think about that?
Yeah.
And they're, we're able to, parents that I'm able to go back and forth with and say, where are you at? And we're all now talking about high school and what does that look like?
I
And
bet.
that's its own, journey. But yeah, I would say that I've had a lot of support and made sure to really latch on to anybody that I know that has had the same story as me. And some people have been more successful down this path than others. Some have had
Mm.
some really rough times. Some people that I know that let's, for example, that didn't work in therapeutic school, they're not really able to do the online thing. Even that's not working for them. So they're still muddling through and they're still trying to figure out how to educate their kid. And it is a lot of letting go of your old ideas and saying, I'm going to be okay if this journey looks really different than what I'm accustomed to. And that's hard.
I when we were during COVID, Kate and I moved off grid, and the woman who owned the land where Kate's teeny house and our gardens were and all of that, had a student with some severe differences. And I remember hearing at that time that sometimes, these kids come as a blessing to show us how locked in our minds are and to free us from some of the conventions and changes. I know this is a little more spiritual vibe than we are normally talking about, but I
Yeah.
also know it doesn't always, like, you're in an amazing place, like your connection with Sam, things are going well, but it might be a longer journey for some families. And I'm actually curious, one aspect of this I want to ask you about that comes up is the online versus in person, right? And how much of your time is going into supporting the in-person help, either just with your connections with him or in the community. Could you talk a little bit about what you've seen, but also maybe, I know you're not a representative for everyone, but
Right.
talk a little bit about that virtual, online, in person. How are you handling that dynamic? What have you seen in that area?
Yeah, that's really interesting too, because it is one of those issues that again, you're sort of saying to yourself, you want it to look familiar to you. So I'm like, oh God, we have to make sure that we're supporting all this online time with in-person time,
Yeah.
right? So we do have certain in-person things that we do. But interestingly, if you asked him, he'd say, can I just talk to my friends online? Because that's where I'm happiest. That's what I enjoy. And I have to really battle my inner feelings about it because I want to be like, yeah, but you really have to. This isn't real. This isn't what it's like to interact. This is, again, all of my stuff, right? I think yours has to look like mine. But the truth is, he is incredibly happy online. He loves talking to his friends. In his mind, and I'm not saying it's not real, I just mean for him, he's incredibly socialized. He's fulfilled. He has all these online relationships, all these online friends, all these people he interacts with, all these kids that he talks to that he has genuine relationships with.
Yeah.
So if it were up to him, we would never do anything in person, or whatever we do in person would be very minimal because
Yeah.
he's super happy
Yeah.
talking to all these people. He's not isolated in that way because all of these schools have kids that want to talk and want to hang out and they're like-minded and
Yeah.
they all have the same interests. They all want to talk about anime and all the same things that kids are into at that age. um so I try to balance it, and we do some things that are in person. They tend to be, again, they're theater and things that are quirky and cool.
Yeah.
But if you asked him, he'd say, I'm really all good. I just want to talk to my online friends, the kids that I know from.
So this is what I mean, and it is like a mental challenge. And I think no, regardless of where your kid falls, like life is constantly evolving. Our society, our planet is in a place that I don't think we really even realize how much change has happened,
Yeah.
especially depending on where we are generationally, right?
Hmm.
There's a lot of judgment on what's right and wrong, and there's a lot of unknown. We don't know what the next step is or where it's heading. And so I really love that we've been able to talk about today some of this aspect of like, as a parent, I have a responsibility to kind of open my own mind, right?
Yeah.
And look at it through their perspective. Obviously, we're still looking out for them. Let's not lock them in a room with no sunlight and a computer
Right.
and think our job's done here. Not to that extreme, but it is interesting what you say. And if we look at our own lives, they might be more virtual than we thought too. If we're
You're
if we're
totally
honest about it, I'm
yes.
thinking my
Yes.
best friend, we haven't hung out in person in a year or two, but we talk every week. So
Right.
this. Let's
Yes.
let's come to one of my favorite parts of this because I've shared with you, I haven't talked about it a ton, but like one of my reasons for doing this is because obviously we have a college coaching business. We help students prepare for college. We help them get jobs after. It covers a lot. I've done a lot with education, taught high school, college, in school, out of school, online, in person, everything. But our real goal is how do we improve the education system in this country? That's where my long-term passion is. That's where my radar is. And so I'd love to get your perspective to start with like, you've had some unique experiences. What do you see as some of the problems with education? And that's open-ended. It might be in a school, it might be at home, it might be systemic, it might be something else like, and we won't dwell on problems too long. I want to get to solutions and good stuff, but what have you seen that's problematic with the systems that you've gone through?
Yeah, I think for me the biggest issue is the inability to individuate.
Mm.
That would be the biggest issue. I
Yeah.
think that when you have a child that, again, is has learning differences and is gifted and learns differently than other kids do, putting them in a regular classroom just is not going to be successful. So if you can't individuate, you're just sort of left, flying blind as far as, putting them into a space. I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest problem. And, we talked about this a little bit. I don't know what the solution to that is, because when you are required to teach 25 children or 30 children, there is no ability to individuate.
It is very, very, very hard.
Yeah.
Very hard to do that well.
Yeah, and I do believe that teachers try And I do believe they want that. And I do believe they want to connect with every kid and they want to make that happen. But, when you have kids at completely different levels sitting in the same space together, it's almost an impossibility.
It almost is.
Really,
Yeah.
it really is. So I think the ability to individuate, and I also think that any child that's sensitive, and you spoke about your own sensitivities, any child that's sensitive, the classroom is not a sensitive environment. It's a
Mhm.
very intense environment, I
And
think.
yeah.
Um, it's intense in terms of sound, sight, smell, and these are all things that my son is super aware of. And it's also really funny too, and I wonder what you think about this. As an adult, if I didn't like the smell of something, let's use that as an example, right? It was like, oh God, I really hate, for my son, it's cheese. I
Oh,
really hate the smell of cheese. I am not going to sit near someone that's eating cheese. As an adult, I would go, ugh, I'm just not going to make that choice.
yeah.
As a child, you are forced, you are told, sorry, there's going to be kids eating cheese and you have to just deal. I've always felt that was a bit unfair, that
Yeah.
somehow what your sensory needs are just like too bad for you. You have to change rather than the environment ever changing. We're not going to change the environment at all. The kid has to change. That doesn't seem fair because it's not what we ask of adults. Like, yes, as adults, you sometimes you go, oh, you got to deal. But
Yeah.
most of the time, you have a choice. Most of the time, you can say, I choose not to do that thing
Yeah.
because it makes me uncomfortable, or I don't like it, or I don't want to go back to that place for whatever reason. For a
Well, it's
kid,
funny when you talk about challenging students to go intellectually and creatively above what we think. There's also this level that, like, giving them their own sense of, I forget the word at the moment, but self-determination almost, we could also give them a lot more and we won't spin out into chaos. Obviously, as most people know, the history of our education system is built around creating factory workers and trying to basically babysit kids whose parents are factory workers, right? So it is inherently set up for
yeah,
more of that just kind of deal. But oh, it's heartbreaking to think about. And also the kids cognitively, they might not even know what's bothering them to that extent, right? And so yeah, it almost is an impossible task. And honestly, that's why I ask every single guest that comes on, hey, what do you think? Because
right.
I know I want to help the problem, but I don't necessarily know what everyone is. And
Yeah,
I love what you said, honestly, that like I don't know what the perfect solution is. I don't know that we have one. Like my goal now is not like build the perfect school that solves all of this. I think it very much is an umbrella thing. And what a kid needs at one stage of life is different than another and different than another. So let me ask you it this way. What have been some of the times where you've met an educator or met a program where you got most excited or you felt most heard or you're like, wow, this is cool. Like what, tell us a little bit. I know you mentioned them, but talk to us about the good that you've seen that people are doing.
yeah. Yeah, I would, again, I would say that starts with really inspired teachers,
Mhm.
teachers who are super excited about what it is that they want to bring to your child, and they really, really want to listen. They're very curious to hear, right? They want to hear what your kid has to say, and they're presenting really exciting subjects.
Cool.
They're presenting, stuff that is really challenging. Um, in a way that is exciting to these kids because they know that they're learning something that's, wow, this is different, this is unique, I'm so excited, I really want to show what I can do.
Yeah.
Like I said, Luca's so motivated by, like, I did it and I did it. I went and did it more than the teacher asked me to do. I brought my absolute best self.
Yeah.
Any teacher that's going to say, wow, Luca, that was amazing, he's just going to be like, I can't wait to do more.
Yeah.
So I think that has been the most exciting thing. And the other thing is that you can curate a reality for your child. That exists now. You can go online and say, you know what? I am going to find these programs, all these different programs, and I'm going to pull from all of them and I'm going to create my own curriculum, for lack of a better word, for my kid. And this is what my day is going to look like. And it's going to look super different than anybody else's. And that to me is exciting. That's the good. That's the really
Oh,
good.
I love hearing this. I'll just dovetail that because we're obviously in a position where we see students starting pretty young in middle school. We see what gets kids into Harvard, Princeton, Yale, all these. We also see what helps them exceed. And we see what leads them not to go to college. And I can tell you that across the board, helping a student develop 2 to 3 areas of interest, helping them take that to a level that truly excites them, that they're doing stuff they wouldn't have done otherwise, and that they're doing stuff that's unique to them. Colleges love this. If you're not going to college, you absolutely need this to be successful in life. So
Yeah.
it is kind of a win to win. And I want to encourage some of the parents out there who are listening to, because some of the stuff starts to feel a little scary. It's a
Yeah.
little nervous at first. So hopefully, Audrey, your story today has been inspiration for them and proof you could do it. And hopefully my whatever sense of Zac telling you it's fine to do is helpful as well for it too. But
Yeah.
this is great. Is there any final words you want to share with any other families who are going through something similar or in a completely different space that you just want to drop some wisdom on them here at the end? Anything come to mind that you want to share
Yeah,
in closing?
I think to just to continue with what you're saying, I think really you can do something outside the box.
Hmm.
It really is okay. It's not you're going to find something that fits, and even if it takes a really long time, or it's a trial and error process, you will find something that works. There are a lot of other parents out there that are in your situation. There's a lot of other kids out there. And when you find your tribe, it's like that's the sweet spot. When you find your tribe, when you find these other, and that's again, that's young scholars, that's all these other programs that exist, and that's the power. The power, it lies in finding the group of people that are going to support you and your kid, and they're out there. They're out there. I just think you have to go out and look and get out of your comfort zone. I agree with that one too. Don't
I
try
love
to
it.
make it look like the way you grew up. We don't even live in that world anymore. Right? Like, why are we trying to make that happen when we don't live there anymore? It's ridiculous. It's crazy. Isn't this the new world? This is the new world. It's all here.
Yeah.
You can make it what you want it to be. That's the cool part about living now. That's
Wow.
the exciting part about living now, I think.
This is the most amazing point to end on. Audra, thank you again for coming on today. I really appreciate everything that you've been through. I know it hasn't been easy, but I'm really excited that we got to connect personally just to know you and stay friends, but also that you came on and shared this story with us. So thank you for being one of the parent heroes.
Thank you so much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you like this, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. If you're like, Audra, I got to talk to that woman, let us know. We will connect you. And if there is anyone out there in your community who's a parent hero, I want to meet him. I want to bring him on the show. So please let us know. Ladies and gentlemen, go out there, do something great. I will see you next time.